What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Jedi Jive Live. Jenny is back. You guys have been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks, and Jenny is finally here. The wait is over. Hang in there for another minute or two. We're going to go live, talk about some Loki Episode 1. Lots of fun things to discuss. Jenny has lots of presidential notes.
We're live. Woo! Hip, hip. Hooray. Woo! We're back.
We're back, friends. Lavelle, our most loyal follower over here.
He's been waiting.
We got Jaden.
Yeah.
We did in our reaction though. If anyone hasn't watched the Jedi Jive reaction, Mike freed the hair. Hashtag free the hair.
Yep, the hair is free. It's a good like Aquaman look or like Namor kind of deal.
Yeah, which we can talk about maybe Saturday. Great Namor.
You look like a sea person.
He is a sea person. We live at the beach.
Well, there you go.
Horrible, heinous hairdo, but he's supposed to be like slithery and yeah, he's supposed to be reptilian and creepy and
I hope it is.
yeah, I was saying, I don't know why we need to compare them. I was saying, think of things that are masterpieces in their own genre. I wouldn't like look at When Harry Met Sally and Schindler's List and try to figure out which is the best movie. That would be an absurd conversation.
I was muted. Oh.
You were muted that whole time?
I was muted the whole time.
Really?
Spoiled again!
The whole time.
Curses!
Oh. You gotta get that Sally Field, Mrs. Doubtfire meme. The whole time.
The whole time!
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
No,
so yeah,
Mike was muted. He was
we're
like,
agreeing
well,
then that this was
compare apples and oranges. All of these shows serve completely different functions while also like amazingly somehow having threads that tie together coherently. And I don't feel the need to compare one to the other. I'm super enjoying each one as it comes.
I concur, but I think this is going to be a darn good orange. You know,
Oh,
I
wait
think
a
this is
minute.
going to be
Wait
It's
a
gonna
minute.
be a great orange, like a juicy
a
vitamin
really,
C filled orange.
really nice
Yes.
orange.
Guys,
You're
I
gonna get
honestly
your
think
vitamins.
I honestly think I had everybody muted. Can you guys? We need to know if you guys can hear us. I set up this stream like frantically. Got home from work, like had to like switch everything up. My setup was all rearranged. I was all discombobulated, but I think we're all set now. I just need a confirmation in the chat that you guys can actually
Nick
hear
literally
us now.
like left my house with his son, ran to his house, and
Okay.
like 5 minutes later set up the stream. It's been
Thank you,
last
Lavelle,
minute.
for the confirmation. Okay, we're on.
Okay.
No longer muted. Good stuff. Okay.
Audio problems.
Are you telling me that all that was muted? Dang.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all right. We didn't talk. We were just talking about how
I mean,
this
Mrs.
was.
Doubtfire.
No,
Yeah.
actually, we had the most interesting, like, philosophical conversation of all time, and you guys missed it. Oops.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
we're good.
No.
No.
We like
Anyway.
Nothing
oranges.
important.
We were talking about how this was. It's too early to claim that this is the best show. It very well might end up being the best one this year, but this was the best first episode that we've gotten out of the 3 shows. We loved WandaVision. We loved Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But like in terms of like WandaVision, we got those quick little double first episode, and after that it was like, all right, we need more information before we can make any judgments. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Bucky and Sam didn't even run into each other in the first episode.
Right, a second
Yeah.
episode.
So it was good, but like this was definitely the most like hyped, like right off the bat. Wow, like what an opening!
I think
like,
it was
what a start.
It was the 3rd episode, the Madge Report episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier that really set
Where
it
it
apart
really
for me.
took off. Oh,
Where
that
Zemo,
was so beautiful.
where they get Zemo, yeah, and it's just
Agreed.
all the great Zemo quotes.
This was so interesting. We talked about this a bit in our reaction, but Falcon and Winter Soldier was such a sleeper. We sort of thought like, okay, I like those guys, but it's going to be a buddy cop show. And it wasn't a buddy cop show at all. It was like a very heavy-handed social commentary with like enormous real world, current, present tense relatability, and just did such an artful job tackling like actual real world issues. And we thought that this was going to be like magical, crazy fantasy land. And indeed, it's going to be magical, crazy fantasy land, but it seems like this is actually following more of a buddy cop format. Like they set this first episode up like a procedural cop show. The scene when you meet Owen Wilson, when it's like Renaissance France, it's like the 1540s in France, but they're looking at the crime scene forensically. It literally could have been a scene out of CSI, like CSI Renaissance France.
Especially the way at the end when he's like, "We're hunting a variant, and the variant is you." Like, you know, you could have put the sunglasses on.
100%.
You know,
I saw Owen Wilson as this like Agent Gibbs character, like out of any show, like which is Mark Harmon from NCIS, which has been on for 900 years. But like any of those shows, the CSI, NCIS type procedural forensic investigation shows, you always have that like one team leader who's a seasoned veteran but very renegade and doesn't play by the rules, and you know, does things his own way outside of like institutional standards. And I saw Owen Wilson's character being set up that way. Like even in that argument that he got into with the hunter, with Wunmi Mosaku's character, where she was like, he's a variant, deal with it, our units are being killed, and he was like, you know, I want to play this by ear, I want to do things my own way. So it's great, but it's really funny to me that of all the shows, this is the one that's being set up to be a weekly, an episodic, a procedural. It's great. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, you and I have obviously like we kind of brushed over like a bunch of subjects earlier when we were just kind of chatting about it. But do you like in your notes that you took, do you have like a specific thing you want to start with that you think is like a good starting point? I could think of 100 things we could start with right now, but
I know the one that's, I can think of 100 things that I think would all be interesting. The one that's really been dominating my mind though, because we didn't really get to this in our reaction, but I can't stop thinking about it since. We have talked a bit about how sus the TVA is, how like very sinister and suspicious they are. There's some really overt things happening. There are three World War II era books that are very clearly being referenced, like specific visual and textual references, which is 1984. That's the obvious one. Les Jeux sont faits by Sartre, which I think Jean-Paul Sartre, which I think is actually the most specific one. I think, although that's the most obscure of the three books, I think that there are like very specific antecedents in that book for this show. And then also Slaughterhouse-Five, which is an anti-war novel by Kurt Vonnegut.
Yes.
Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh,
Good one.
and the fact that Slaughterhouse-Five, as I didn't even think about this, as a book is
So it
written
goes.
achronologically.
It's
There's
written
no
achronologically. It's written out of order.
Yeah.
Billy
Yeah.
Pilgrim, the main character, is captured by aliens whose big phrase is "so it goes." They think
Yeah.
that life and death, the sort of
Yeah.
scope of human life and death, is so
Put in a
meaningless.
zoo.
Hey, Mandy's
They
here.
put him in a
Cool.
zoo, but
Is-
Mandy, hey,
She came to say hi to Jenny. Hey,
But,
don't worry if you need to go to bed, Mandy. We know it's late where you're at, so that's
No,
all
Go
screw
read
good.
that,
Slaughterhouse
Mandy. Hang
Five.
out with us. Stay up.
Yes.
So basically, if you haven't read any of those books, like, have you been to a school? Go read 1984.
Lavelle
Yeah.
says Slaughterhouse Five was so
Slaughterhouse
boring
Five.
in high school.
It's not
No,
boring
Slaughterhouse
now, I
Five was
promise you.
good.
It was a visionary novel. Kurt Vonnegut was a prisoner of war in World War II. He survived the firebombing of Dresden. He's only one of only like a handful of people of any country who actually survived that event. And he started writing that book very early as an anti-war novel, and like his publishers were not ready. They're like, we're not going to publish an anti-war novel. This is America. We love war. And it didn't get published until 1969 at the onset of the Vietnam War, at which point he was like, are we really doing this again? Like, I've been through this. I know how it ends. And then the other two books that I mentioned were 1984 and Les Jeux sont faits, which is usually translated in English as the game is up, but that is not what it means. It's a gambling term that means significant from an existential point of view. It means like the chips are down, like your cards have already been played, all bets have been, it's a gambling term. It's used in casinos. When you say les jeux sont faits, it means like all of your bets have already been placed. You have exercised all the free will you're entitled to. And now it's up to fate. You can't change the outcome of like this
Whoa.
roulette wheel or something.
I
now,
feel like
so.
were we talking about Loki, or did I just like find myself in a college like lecture
Both.
right now?
It can be both. Why not both?
I'm trying to think. I was thinking about Slaughterhouse Five recently, and I can't remember why. As it pertained to something else. That's some piece of media that I was like, "This is."
It's
Slaughterhouse Five.
really significant here. Not only that he experienced after he escapes from this planet where he's been held captive, where they are like an achronological species, and
Oh, it was Arrival. I watched Arrival
Arrival.
again,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
and I was like, "This is like Slaughterhouse
yeah,
Five."
the Amy Adams. Yes, that's
Yeah,
actually a great connection. That was a good movie. But it's really interesting because the idea of like even Infinity Stones here are meaningless, and the aliens, the Tralfamadorians in Slaughterhouse Five, they have this phrase, "so it goes," like life and death. So it goes. It's not important. And there were so many little things. I also thought of like in The Mandalorian, well, they'll be like, this is the way. And there's a religious overtone to it. So when Gugu Mbatha Raw, the judge, Renslayer, her character was like, this is the way it's supposed to be. That's the way they have this thing, like this one timeline, the sacred timeline. This is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Kept
To take it
thinking of
back,
like, so it goes.
to take it back to Loki, because I love the chat's
Yeah.
like, I'm trying to connect the two topics.
Yeah.
I think, because I think those are all those good points about Slaughterhouse Five. In the context of Loki, I think it's all like Loki's saying. I think it's a manipulation. I think that
100%.
yeah,
Yes.
I think that the TVA is, if anything, and this isn't my theory, but I've heard this because even before we go like into the context of the MCU, we know that Spider-Man: Far From Home is going to have multiple versions of Spider-Man. Or we're pretty sure. It's like 99% sure. We know that a movie is called Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We know that Wanda is like going into the multiverse in Endgame.
And she's a Nexus being, and we've already heard Nexus being.
And in Endgame and Infinity War, we saw Doctor Strange literally look through
Love
like
it.
14 million timelines.
All the threads, man.
Yes.
And in like we know, we see the Sorcerer Supreme, Tilda Swinton, like show the whole timeline thing and how there are multiple timelines and we know that Kang has been cast, Kang the Conqueror, a character
He's
explicitly
Jonathan Majors from Lovecraft Country, which is also where Wume Masako, who plays the Hunter, they're both on Lovecraft
who is
Country.
explicitly like a multi-timeline villain. All of Endgame, like we know that there is a multiverse in the MCU. Yeah. We know that like that is a thing, whether it like we know that for almost 100% fact. Yeah. So the fact that they're like, well, there's only like the whole, to go back to the 1984 thing, like the posters, the propaganda posters on the wall, where it's
they
like
even had one that was like always watching,
the timeline, like always watching. It's like,
Big Brother's watching you.
I think that Kang is used because this is the ultimate power in the universe, right? Loki says as much. And I don't think like the whole TVA is a farce. Like I think they do have this power, but I think Kang has like replaced the timekeepers and is using the TVA as sort of like this is the ultimate power. So whoever's controlling it is deciding what can and can't happen. Like it's not that there isn't free will; it's that the decisions that are made that people don't like, someone at the top is saying, "No, that
this
can't
is
happen."
why I bring up,
That
like,
doesn't
I know this
exist.
is very heady stuff, but this is why I bring up these books, which literally, if you have not read any of those 3 books, I don't know how you graduated high school, but please go read them. But it's why I bring this up, because the question that out of Les Jeux sont faits, what
That
it
and
is
Catcher in the Rye. That's the other one.
oh, please don't read that. That's
No,
terrible. That's an
I
awful
just meant like you need to read that. If
you
you've been in high
probably
school.
should have probably
Yeah.
read it in high school, but they should take it off the curriculum. But in Les Jeux sont faits, what happens is that there is fate, there's destiny, and these 2 people are fated, like predestined to be each other's soulmates. But there is also an element of free will, which can account for like variation and deviation. And I guess they screw it up. They have enough free will that they never meet in real life. And they end up in this like bureaucratic way station. It's like an afterlife DMV. And when Loki was being processed and he had no idea what was happening and he had to sign the stack of everything he'd ever read, I was
take
like,
a number.
Take a number, please, like strip off your clothes, like all of this stuff. I was like, it is Les Jeux sont faits. It's the exact scenario where they go through this ridiculous bureaucracy and they're dead and they have no idea what is happening. And there are a lot of questions that come up. Basically, there's a deal made, like we'll put you back on Earth, we'll put you back alive in your lives. But if you don't fall in love within the space of a week, you're going to be dead forever this time. And they're fighting against sort of knowing how things turned out the first time. They're basically fighting against their own original timeline. And it's this existential question of if you already know how things were supposed to turn out or how things are going to turn out, can you possibly exercise free will under those circumstances? Like if you already have a predetermined idea of the outcome, is free will possible? To what extent is it possible? These are, I mean, again, this is very heady. This is super, even for me, this is very nerdy stuff. But I think it was so specifically referenced with this weird bureaucratic, opening scene that Loki went through that I was like, I think this is relevant. And I think they're probably going to explore that theme through the lens of this fun, wacky sci-fi show, which is cool. The thing with the 1984 references, which we saw some of this in Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well. There was that like the power brokers watching you mural that we saw in Madripoor. And then they have all these little signs with this minutes, very explicit, but that literally one of them said like always watching or, we're always watching, and all these little propaganda posters that are like your corporate overlords are watching, but also like Big Brother is watching. There's something
the whole everyone's like live their lives behind a desk, and like it's so 1984. Like these people don't. Like Casey doesn't know he didn't even know what a fish was. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Speaking of that, a bunch of people pointed out to me that was a direct reference to this movie Scream, because it's "I'll gut you like a fish, Casey." And he even said it in that voice, like "I'll gut you like a fish, Casey." Yeah.
I don't even know what a fish is. Anyway,
that was a direct reference to Scream. I love that.
This isn't my theory, but I have heard a theory that all of the like workers in the TVA are all variants that have been taken from timelines, and that's why they don't know anything, and like they've been like reset or whatever, and so then they just exist and like are being manipulated by whoever's in charge of the TVA to do their bidding.
Information for that yet? I can't either agree or disagree with your theories about Kang just because I don't have the information. I think it's a very good guess that this hooded figure is Kang, and it seems.
Oh no. That's Loki.
You don't
I think
so?
That's Loki.
Okay,
that's Lady Loki. Right? That's Lady Loki.
That might be. You think that one's Lady Loki?
And for sure.
And also, we know that Kang is supposed to show up in Ant-Man 3.
I know that Lady Loki has been cast. Like there was a casting announced, and so Lady Loki's for sure coming. And they said,
I think that's Lady Loki.
The variant is you. So, and we know that they're making a point about Loki's gender fluidity. I really hope. Side note, I'm so excited that they're representing gender fluidity in the MCU. I hope that they don't stop short at like he can be a boy or a girl and we'll make a transphobic joke about it. Like I really hope that's not their interpretation.
This is Disney
what
Plus.
It means to be
you bet your ass that's all it's going to be.
But we'll see what they do with that. But like I know that they had a casting announced for Lady Loki, so that seems like that's for sure the devil that is wreaking havoc on the timeline everywhere.
I think they're going to team up though.
Either way,
because we don't know anything about how did the other Loki variants come to be in the first place. where did they, or
exactly. Like, how do these variants even exist? Like,
yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
like, what are
the
their
really,
motivations?
Mike
and
I started to have like a really deep conversation, and then we were like, wait, save it for the
and
stream.
the way the TVA like soldiers, the time or the Minutemen at the end, like when they show up in the oil field in Oklahoma, and they're just like, whatever, it's not even worth the paperwork. Like, just the way that whole scene was, the way that like dialogue was shot, it feels like there's just another layer of this is a nefarious organization. They
Well,
don't even care.
the conversation that I actually really wanted to touch on all the existential philosophy, because I think that's going to be a huge underpinning of the show. But the really interesting conversation Mike and I started to have was like, yes, the 1984 thing is going on. Yes, there is some, unseen hand pulling the strings here. So yes, I think automatically they're sus, they're sinister, they're nefarious. But what I think is even sort of more off-putting is that there's really a bioethics. It's a bioethics issue going on. The way that they will like erase variants on site. That Wunmi Mosaku, her character, is like very trigger happy. She just wants to sting them all with her little stick and erase them. And I was,
reset.
Prune.
Yeah,
them.
reset.
Yeah, prune them.
Yep.
And prune. Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, first and foremost, the whole story, that Little Miss Minutes animated I Dream of Jeannie thing,
Love the
tells a
Scooby-Doo
story.
noise in there.
It was very like happy-go-lucky, but the story they're telling is a supremacist story. It was like, we decided one timeline was the real one, and that was our decision, and the other people in the other timelines who are affected by this didn't really get a say in the matter. That is a supremacist line of thinking. And I think that there is an actual bioethics issue about the way they treat variants, which is the same conversation we would have about like clones. For the definitive conversation on like cloning and bioethics, go watch Orphan Black, starring future She-Hulk Tatiana
Levi, for a
Maslany,
second,
and,
I
like,
thought Jenny was starting to talk about Star Wars, and I was getting, like, super excited.
well,
I
we
was
can
ready.
talk about Star Wars, because I will tell you what, where my
Well, because
head
Michael Waldron. That's why. Michael Waldron's writing.
not
Kevin
only
Feige's
because
Star Wars
Michael Waldron, but where my head immediately went, we had this machine that he had to go through. They had to say, like, please confirm you're not a robot. And he said, what if I were a robot? And they said you'd be like incinerated.
They said if you know you're a robot, though. It's not just that you're a robot. If you know you're a robot.
Oh,
Because I feel
right,
like because I feel like someone like Vision, like, does that constitute them
We
having
talked
a
about
what I
soul?
was
this.
thinking of, and I will tell you where my head immediately went. That came to me later, but where my line of thinking first went was to Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character in Solo, in the Han Solo movie.
Yeah.
Lando's buddy, the droid who leads like the droid uprising and frees all the slave droids, and she's super into like personhood for droids. I was like, I don't know how I feel in the real world about AI. That's a longer conversation. I mean, I do know how I feel, but it's a longer conversation. But in a world where we have seen Vision, go back to that conversation Vision and White Vision had about the ship of Theseus, right?
Yes.
And like thinking about that and thinking about Phoebe Waller-Bridge and the personhood for droids movement that she was leading. And I was like, why are we just incinerating robots? Why?
Just
like,
for the chat, by the way, that's L337.
L337. She was amazing. I love that character. She was so great. But that was what I was like, we just saw a show with an incredibly deep-seated philosophical thought about identity and personhood with this person made out of metal and wire.
Yeah.
So, and you think about all of your favorite robots in movies, whether it's Vision or like R2-D2, they have personalities, right?
It's not just limited to the robots, though. It extends to the variants themselves, too, because that one guy that gets incinerated in the waiting room, like, we're assuming that guy, like, didn't even know how he got there.
The Goldman Sachs guy, did you catch
that? Yes, didn't even know how he got there. Loki's a shifty character. He's the god of mischief, but
which actually led me to like wonder, like, okay, we know Loki like created an alternate timeline by using the Tesseract on himself. So like, how we haven't heard about like what other mechanism, like when they're showing that little cartoon of like a variant like moving off.
It says you could even be late for work. It says
so it was like, what other mechanisms cause like a rift in time where like they create their own timeline and then have to be incinerated by the TVA?
That's why it's got to be BS, because like literally every decision I feel like could do.
Well, and did you see how they depicted them? They were like little Keystone Cop villains. They were like spy versus spy type animation characters who were like he like evil looking smile. And I was like, quite frankly, this is the way Nazis depicted Jews, with like exaggerated features, and they tried to make all the Germans should I say but like it's true. That is like a Nazi propaganda technique. And that's what they tried to make these people look scary, and you're like, they're just people, and half of them have no idea how they got, at least half of them have no idea how they got there. even Loki,
Yeah.
who is a shifty character, didn't know that this was going to
And
happen. Like, he didn't
Mobius
do it on
even
purpose.
says to the what's the like the cop that the actress's name? What was
Ravenna Renslayer?
Wunmi
Or
Mosaku,
B-15?
the hunter, B-15, yeah.
B-15. Oh, okay. Yeah, like when they were having their little conversation in the hallway, and she was like, what are you doing? And he was like, you want to reset everybody. So clearly, like, you said, like, she's trigger happy.
She's super trigger happy, and she's
But it's
efficient.
almost
She's
like-
obviously good at her job, and she's
But they're not
following
even being
orders.
selective about it. It's almost like that whole waiting room with like the whatever they're waiting in a waiting room basically, and they take a number. But it seems like it doesn't matter whether you're guilty or not. They're gonna like incinerate you either way. You're not gonna, right? They made it
this
seem
doesn't
like
end
everybody
happily.
gets incinerated.
Because it's like I'm telling you, I think, and the reason I saw some Kang discussion, like, you really think Kang's gonna show up? I feel like he'd be the end tease.
He'll
the
be
show.
teased. Yes,
I think he'll
He'll
be
be
teased.
teased. I think
'Cause-
it makes sense. I don't have enough information to like agree or disagree with your whole theory of
Didn't the like
thought that
timekeepers,
he's-
the way they were depicted, don't they kind of look
The middle
like
one
Kang?
kind of looked like Kang, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like they're the same species.
My whole
from the
thing
same,
about him, though, is
By
like
the way,
Kang-
I'm not going to mess with screen sharing because it screwed up our audio last time, but I had put together some like side-by-side images, but just everybody in the chat, go look up Griffith Park Sundial. The entire TVA, actually the entire Griffith Observatory, like the museum, when they went into the Time Theater, that was also like Griffith Park. You have to go into like a theater to go into the planetarium and see the playback.
Yeah.
But those timekeeper, that statue, it is like a direct copy. Even the thing they're doing with their hands, like they're doing this like thing with their hands, this people on the Griffith Park sundial,
yeah,
which
and the fact that
is a
no
clock.
one can talk to them, and it's like, well, they're busy, I'm like, they're dead. They
They're
don't
dead.
exist.
When
they're
they
dead.
were
They're a figurehead.
when they were like on that balcony, Mobius and Loki, and they were like overlooking that enormous like Jetson style city. Is that
Yeah.
supposed to be like the TVA city of like TVA employees and or like where?
Yeah,
what
it's
was
just
that
like
supposed
infinite
to be?
TVA-ness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like where, like I know they kind of like exist outside of time, like, but it's like where is this physical place that the TVA exists?
You
Like,
know,
what-
there's this
it's
show.
outside of time.
It was a funny show. There were 2 seasons of it, and I liked the first season much better
because
than
there's
the
like
second.
a physical city with physical
it's
flying
right-
cars in it.
it's
and-
here.
Yeah, behind it. There's this show
Yeah,
that I
the
don't know if
city's behind
anybody has
Levi right
seen
now. Yeah.
called Miracle Workers. It had Harry Potter in it. Daniel Radcliffe was the star of it, just
What that?
doing crazy sketch comedy.
Yeah.
And in the first season, it's like they played completely different characters in the second season, but in the first season I think it was like the afterlife, and Steve Buscemi was like this lazy god who did like be God, but he didn't really want to do his job, and he was
Is
just
that the official way you say his name, Buscemi?
Buscemi.
I say Buscemi, but
I always said
Everybody does.
Buscemi.
He
Yeah.
says Buscemi. I'm trying to
Bus-
adjust
Well,
it.
he's
probably
'cause
right
he's-
then.
Yeah,
I've
I
also
don't know.
heard Bushimi, but like
Yeah,
Bus-
I always have said Buscemi, but he says Buscemi, so I'm gonna
Go
go
with
with
what he
him.
says.
it's definitely that then.
But
Yes.
but like it was this. They had a similar thing where it was this like it was a very funny show. There was nothing serious about it. It's like a hilarious comedy. But there are these like afterlife workers who have these boring bureaucratic jobs, and it was a similar thing where it was this whole complex. There was a whole like industrial park. Back to Kurt Vonnegut. It's like Ilium, New York. It's the
Oh,
GE plant that this is all based on, which is like a plant that is literally an entire city. They had in the show Miracle Workers, it was the same thing where it was like they all had these boring desk jobs in different departments, and they had this whole like complex, this whole city that was like the afterlife city. And I kind of look at the TVA that same way.
Michelle in the chat says, I think a lot of the city is an illusion. And I think it wasn't that even Loki's
Probably.
first reaction. He was like, this isn't real.
Yeah, this isn't real.
And Mobius was like, yeah, it's real. Like, but like it very well could be an illusion. Like if we're going back to the whole like is Kang, I know Levi, you said
I only
You
think Kang so much because his whole, for the chat, if you don't know, like his whole villainness, like his whole motive is ruling multiple timelines. Like that's his
Yeah.
whole thing, is a time going through time and ruling time. And so a villain like that cannot exist in a singular sacred timeline scenario. And
So here's my question. Your theory is that he's actually running the TVA and that it's all like an illusion under his control?
well, because Ravenna Renslayer, the judge woman, who we can assume
Yeah.
is like
Has a relationship with
the
him.
head judiciary of the TVA, and she's making the judgments on these people, and she dictates based off of what the timekeepers tell her, but no one can see the timekeepers. She's just making these decisions,
yeah.
and we know
Right.
her character in like the comic history is very closely related to Kang. She is not a good character. She's like Kang's on and off girlfriend.
My thing is like, is it possible that instead of, again, I have no information, I'm just thinking out loud, but is it possible that instead of like him running things or pulling,
I think it's like a Hydra situation. And
is it maybe that he's trying to bring them down so that no one's there to stop
interesting.
him?
Lavelle asked, does anyone know how Kang breaking the sacred timeline and traveling through time does it create additional Kang variants?
Or is he a Nexus being as well?
I think it's like a Hydra situation. I think it's a Hydra in S.H.I.E.L.D. situation. I think Kang
Hydra in S.H.I.E.L.D. Okay,
like
so
infiltrated
that,
the TVA, and like there are good people in the TVA, but it's rotten at the core.
The thing about that immediately makes sense, just from literally like, not from a storytelling standpoint, but I guess from a marketing standpoint, is that comics, including the MCU, do reuse the same storylines and plot devices because they work. So I guess it would make sense to repeat kind of that.
I just think that the whole premise, like to take it into a macro perspective, the whole premise of within the MCU there being only one timeline, when comics as a storytelling medium are all about having all of these various different timelines, and even within like the comic world, like that's so key to the comic book experience, is multiple universes, multiple timelines. Having just one, I feel like cheapens the whole thing.
That's what I told myself to make myself feel better about all the X-Men movies. That's how I justified all of the X-Men movies to myself, was like, they just exist in different worlds. These are all just different. Like I really wanted to make sense of the impossible timeline instinctively, and I had to justify it to myself, being like, they're comic books, they can all exist at once, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. If Kang is a Nexus being, does that sort of inherently mean that like Wanda Maximoff is the only character that can take him out in the end? Or that, I mean, we're already kind of,
or Doctor Strange, but I mean, I think that he's confirmed for
part of the reason
Ant-Man
they didn't
movie,
keep
for
Doctor
Ant-Man
Strange
3.
in the end scene of WandaVision is because they didn't want it to seem like he was overshadowing her. So I think they've already made a play to be like, no, Wanda is like, she's the max, she's the top of the food chain in terms
and
of
tie it to the thumbnail.
But keep in mind, Doctor Strange did go and like talk to Dormammu, and you know, he's got some mojo as well, for sure.
Yeah. Someone else pointed out in the comments how like even Dormammu wouldn't have any power like in the TVA. Like the time scenario that Doctor Strange uses to defeat Dormammu is like irrelevant when you consider the way the TVA runs things. Like
that was a mind-blowing moment. Yeah. Mandy's pointing out, and I agree, our minds were all blown by like seeing this like junk drawer full of Infinity Stones. That was
Did you notice that there was only one like the Vision Stone? Is that the big orange one? What's the?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, there was like 5 or 6 of every other color, but there's only one of that one. I thought that was interesting.
I mean, we've all had moments like that in real life where like you're really stoned and you suddenly understand like the whole universe, like the reflecting mirrors.
Have we, Jenny? Have we all had that?
Yes, no. We've all had that, Mike. It's 2021. But you know, it was definitely that moment for Loki. It was that moment for us as an audience as well. But this is so silly, but I kept thinking of like, I told Mike about this earlier, the very end of the first Men in Black movie, because there's been this whole conversation about Orion's belt, and there's a whole galaxy inside like a cat's collar, but it's like that there's a whole world in there, and or whole universe, a whole galaxy in there, and then it like zooms out and it's like the whole city and the whole planet Earth and the whole Milky Way, and then like the whole solar system, and then there's like a giant
we're in a marble.
We're all inside a marble that he's eating. You know, the scale, they just took the scale. Supernatural is a show that has done this really well. It lasted for 15 seasons. And at first they would be like fighting monsters. And then they had like done monsters for long enough that they'd be like, now they're fighting demons. And they did that for long enough. It's like, now they're fighting the literal devil. Yeah. And then when they tied that up, it would be God, like actually God. And then they'd have to be like, God, he's just a lonely incel named Chuck. There's so much more in the universe than God to be worried about. Wow. And by the end of the show, it was literally like, the whole universe is going to collapse in on itself if these 2 white boys don't save it. So it was a really good show, though. I liked that show.
Actually, you know what? Lavelle just said something I think is really important. He says, I need a forehead massage because this issue of Time hurts my brain. And I think yeah, that's funny. But it also is because I remember in our reaction, Jenny, one thing I pointed out was like, oh, anytime you involve time and time travel and timelines in any medium, you're automatically like, creating like this layered scenario that gets harder.
And that's why I think it's all BS, because I don't think the MCU goes that deep sometimes.
And I was about to say, like, I think like Feige and all of them, they're aware that like they have a huge audience and an enormous.
Who is this Marvel Studios in the comment?
there's an enormous
Yeah, sure.
percentage of the audience that is not going to be able to like follow all of these layers, and they're going to
really tickles me. That's funny.
They're
going to
need to simplify the storyline in some way so that like we don't get too confused.
Mixing it all together. Like I enjoy, and I think like a sizable portion of our audience enjoys like going deep and thinking about existential philosophy and stuff like that. But there's so much to grab onto, even if you're not engaging with any of that. There's like great action sequences and there's funny banter. By the way, I did not know that Owen Wilson was like a real actor.
Wow.
I have no problem with Owen Wilson. I love Owen Wilson. I'm a fan of his, but like
there's in Cars,
like,
Jenny.
Huh? What?
Lightning McQueen.
you ever seen Cars?
Of course I've seen Cars. But he's like Jenny... known for like Wedding Crashers and like Wes Anderson movies, and he's known for being this like snarky like frat boy character. And this was actually like a much deeper. There's a lot going on. He had some witty banter, but there's a lot going on under the surface with that character.
He was mostly
and I was
serious.
Like, I didn't know he was like a real actor. Like props to Owen Wilson. And,
he was also very like low key and calm the whole time, and very like he seems like very in control and like not afraid of the horrible scenarios that could play out because of all this. He seems very because one question we asked was like, does this sort of like he said that the time works differently in the TVA, but did that sort of indirectly imply that Mobius has been doing this job for like centuries, like
for like eternity? For
has he been doing this for thousands of years? Yeah, exactly.
Or is it even a scale that we don't have a word for because this is
or
like all time?
Another thing we were like, oh, we can assume that employees in the TVA are sort of like variants that they plucked out and like gave them a job or
they just seem like drones, like
but is everybody in the TVA
create
a variant?
Them? There was somebody who said like, did the TVA create? There was some little conversation about like that. Did they create you? Where did they come from? We don't really know the answer to that.
The only thing that seems like the only reason I would think that the TVA isn't like an illusion of any kind is because they do harness that power. They do have the ability to like go into the timeline and like erase a timeline, or so it seems like even if it were partially an illusion, it definitely has to be real to some degree.
That's why I think it's definitely legit, but I don't think their whole like
I
don't think
you could render a tesseract like inert, then the power is there.
I just don't think the concept of time that they're presenting is factual.
Yes.
I don't think it'd be a weird like MCU thing or like Marvel show thing to be like, oh yeah, free will doesn't exist. Like I feel like it'd be a weird. I don't like that doesn't seem like I understand, and it always does present. It's really heady and it presents fun themes to talk about, but in the context of this Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is for like 12-year-olds as well as 50-year-olds, I don't think they're going to present this. Yeah, your life doesn't mean anything, kids. Like watching this was, and I don't mean like that in the most cynical way, but it was kind of cynical because watching Mobius, it was like watching him peel an onion of Loki. Like when he watches himself,
100%,
and he watches himself die. Like that's horrific. Like that's not cool.
Expert. This is why I say there are layers to this character. He was cool as a cucumber the whole time. He engaged in witty banter, but like he played him like a violin. He knew when to like stroke his ego a little bit, like you were DB Cooper. I'm a big fan. Oh my gosh.
So I think,
but then to like punch him in the gut right when he's on the hook. He's like an incredibly efficient interrogator. This is somebody who would be a good torturer if he needed to be because he knows all these techniques.
So I think you can maintain that like that emotional core of the show with using the time stuff, but then subvert it with Loki is going to team up with this other Loki, I think, and turn against the TVA. That's what I'm predicting. And then they're going to try and
that. Or here's the thing: I know that season 2 of the show is already
nonsense.
I know that season 2 of the show is already in development. It's confirmed to be in development already. So I don't know if the TVA will stay the TVA, if it will get a new name, but I presume, especially because they are setting it up as like a procedural cop show, I kind of presume that Owen Wilson might continue and that there might be some kind of partnership or buddy cop element there. What's interesting to me, this goes, Starsky and Hutch. Yeah, time traveling Starsky and Hutch, literally that. But what's going to be great is to see, and this isn't big philosophical stuff. This is just storytelling stuff, the character development So there's an article in the LA Times, there's an interview in the LA Times this morning with the writer and director of the show, who said part of the function of showing Loki all those films back, not just for exposition, not just for the audience, but because we have gone through a process over years with the character. We've seen his emotional arc, we've seen his character development, we've seen him grow as a character, and it's kind of like become good or become better. And they didn't want to invalidate that. They didn't want to be like, oh, well, this is a variant. He never got to grow. Sorry, all that emotional journey you went through was for naught. They wanted to validate the work that Tom Hiddleston and the audience had already done with each other. So by showing Loki that, they incorporate the knowledge of that into his character. But I pointed this out in our reaction. Now he has the knowledge of that, and that has an effect on him. Presumably a profound effect on him, but he hasn't experienced it. So he's still going to have to go through his own set of experiences and learn to be good in this world. He's going to have to learn to be the best version of himself that this variant can be, based on the experiences that this variant is going to have. So I wonder, again, I don't know which way things are going to go, but I wonder if there's a way either that he can like help to redeem that. Maybe his glorious purpose is to help redeem the TVA, make them a little less sus, treat equal other timelines with equity. Or maybe like he and Mobius are going to do their own thing if the TVA gets destroyed. I don't know. But I kind of wonder if they're just setting him up to be like a Doctor Who character who lives out of time and travels through time and helps fix other people's problems, but in a more equitable way and in a more transparent way.
On top of this, we want to see Loki in the next Thor movie, right? Or like, you want to see Loki in interact with these characters again.
Interesting question that we were asking earlier, Jenny, was about the like, since Loki like died and we saw that character development and we saw that character arc for Loki and it eventually ended in him dying. Now that we're bringing him back via the TVA, is this a cheap way for them to bring Loki back, which like undercuts that original storyline?
I think by presenting
if he
all
learns
that
a whole new set of lessons as in a new character arc in this show, that's essentially creating an all new Loki, an all new character, and that like this isn't the original Loki. So he would have to like come to terms with like the original storyline, the original timeline Loki. Like he would have to be like accept the fact that he dies in reality. And that there's
Marvel has done this before. Just going to point out that Phil Coulson has died like 5 times.
We even saw him die again in this episode.
Even had a line at some point in season 7 where he said like, dying's kind of my superpower, because he's just a human, right? Like,
I think I cut it out of our reaction for edit time, Jen.
They did.
We both
reacted. Had to like keep Clark Gregg in the show because he was under contract. But and also we all love Coulson, but like Coulson legitimately died. The version of Coulson that currently exists in the MCU is an android. But he's still Coulson, and he has all of Coulson's memories. And again, bioethics. Is that a real person? Do we have to treat
you were a robot?
Like he does know he's a robot.
Exactly. I'm saying like,
he also has all of human Phil Coulson's memories and relationships and emotions, and at what point
vision.
At what point does that person have the same human rights as the original Phil Coulson did? This is the thing I'm talking about with variants. This is a really complex bioethics question that has appeared before in the MCU. And again, we know that Coulson and I think Quake are coming back. So I think that this is a relevant conversation for like future projects that we're all having about like personhood for droids, personhood for hybrid creatures, like what, personhood for variants. We have to think about these issues, and like when is something like a security concern, like the robots are coming to kill you, and when is it a supremacist line of thought, like they are an entire group that deserve rights as well.
In my mind, it's funny because I'm going in my mind. How in Endgame they kind of talk about the movie Back to the Future and other movies that involve
nonsense.
They just talk about other movies with time travel, and it's like, you can't think about it like based on what you've seen in the movies, but like in general, like I feel like I'm still thinking about Back to the Future and how like think about how like Doc Brown draws that alternate timeline to be like, Biff created this alternate timeline.
Yes.
and it's drawn the exact same way that they drew it in that little cartoon where it's like a straight line and then
and like a thing that goes off.
So I just feel like this concept is something that's been explored like a lot in the past, but it's also something that you can't really you can't really delineate it because it doesn't make sense. It's so absurd.
I felt like there was a little.
And Endgame made that argument with that, like, well, it's so absurd, we're not even going to try to explain it right now. You just need to kind of accept it.
Well, Bruce Banner presents the if you travel to the past, then that past becomes your future explanation.
Yeah.
So it's just a continuous sort of thing.
The time-space continuum. I felt like there was a little Back to the Future Easter egg, by the way, when they landed in Oklahoma and they found the little device that had been put there, obviously, to lure them there.
It's like a time
well, yeah.
Somebody made a comment. One of the Minutemen.
It's from the year 3000, though.
Probably just
No, actually, Levi, I made this.
Like, I think somebody just from the future came back to get rich, and I was like, oh, it's a Back to the Future. Biff.
Yeah.
They said it's from the third millennium.
Well, I know I made that mistake like in real time too, Levi, and that they were like, because I was like, oh, Mobius is MMM, and that's in Roman numerals is 3000.
No, that's when Kang is from.
Third millennium though is the 2000s. They say early third millennium, so that would be like 2100.
Okay,
that's right.
I also think that would be
over. Is that true?
Yes.
But
yeah.
So we're in the third millennium right now, but they say early third millennium.
That shovel did not look like it was from close to now.
But it could be from like the year 2150 or 2200 or.
That was a pretty space-looking shovel.
Levi, off the top of your head, do you know like what year Kang is supposed to be from?
But keep in mind, Levi, this is a universe where there are like nano masks and spaceships.
Okay, so maybe
you
know what? I don't want to get all Ralph Boner on us all this, too early. But MMM is 3000 in Roman numerals. Just saying, like Mobius
I just
could
think you're
be Kang.
overthinking it.
Mobius is Kang. That's mine. That's it.
I don't know. I don't think that.
Mephisto confirmed.
I definitely don't think that.
Mephisto started trending on Twitter by the time I got home from Mike's house. It was like 4:30 in the morning.
Well, I don't know because
Mephisto was trending on Twitter.
When it shows them in the like the 1500s in that church in
Loki,
France,
man. That's
or whatever.
I know that's Loki, but like everyone was like Mephisto. I was joking. I was not serious, but I myself was like Mephisto confirmed.
But Mobius is obviously like he said like, oh, I take on particularly dangerous variants or whatever, and then he insulted Loki. He's like, you're just a little pussycat.
Yeah, you're a pussycat. But exactly, like, this is to my point. He's such a skilled investigator. He knows he's pushing his buttons there.
But what I was gonna say is,
full of that scene.
I don't want to get too deep in the Mobius's Kang thing necessarily, but if Loki
he's not Kang.
If there are multiple variants of Loki and Loki's variants are creating like massive trouble in multiple timelines, that would mean Kang would have already pinpointed Loki as a thorn in his side, somebody that he has to take care of. Somebody
I think exactly. I think that this variant Loki is fighting against the TVA in like a you guys are evil kind of way. And like,
exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Like that lends evidence to the fact that Mobius may be Kang, like trying to take over the timeline.
Mobius is definitely not
Loki
Kang. Kang is involved, I think, but they are not the same.
Kang's involved somewhere.
All right. Well, when I'm right, we're gonna come back, and I'm gonna.
If Owen Wilson, like Mission Impossible, pulls off the mask and it's John Majors, I'll be.
It's the old man who runs the amusement park.
Yeah, like Scooby-Doo. Then
honestly,
I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you damn kids.
Whether it's like Lady Loki or multiple Loki variants, Loki is the god of mischief. It would be very on brand. He's a classic trickster character, like every culture has. He's the Nordic version, but like he is this trickster. It would make sense for him to be wrecking havoc.
No, Lavelle, he wouldn't just shoot Loki because it's the Loki variant that they can't catch. It's the Loki variant that is one step ahead of them.
But the really interesting
but I mean like they need the original timeline Loki who has just become a variant.
He's dead.
I know, but I meant like this new variant that went into the Tesseract that's our main character now. Like they specifically need him to help them figure out himself. Like we need you
from a character development standpoint, it's like, can this Loki, instead of joining in the mischief, actually help to control the mischief?
Yeah.
Because I think that this whole TVA sacred timeline thing is super supremacist thinking. I don't think one timeline should get priority over all the other living creatures. Yeah, I think that is like that. We talked about this. There's that
John Walker should work for the TVA.
Zemo and Bucky had about how like supremacist thinking, and we've talked a lot about how Zemo's like ideologically rigid. He's an ideologue. He's an extremist. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is the thinking of the TVA. Like, we made this decision, may have been arbitrary at the time, but everybody else just has to obey it, even if that means that we don't give you full personhood, even if that means we just delete you on sight, And I don't like that, but at the same time, I also don't think it's okay to like make the universe collapse. There have been other indications in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., in WandaVision, we saw like the Darkhold, which is like if you steal energy from one, plane of reality, one universe, and bring it into the other universe, you risk all of the universes collapsing on themselves. So that's also not okay. Where's the middle ground? And I wonder if like this version of Loki, our new 2012 Tesseracted Loki, can become like morally clear enough, can develop enough of a morally clear position to help defeat the more morally ambivalent versions of himself.
Yeah. You know what? You did mention how like Loki was forced to like watch these important moments from the original Loki's timeline, and like although like the story is there for him to see the experience he doesn't have, he simply is watching like a video of it, right? But like at the same time, like Tom Hiddleston was very like, in terms of like his acting performance, they really made it seem like it was hitting him hard, like all at once. Obviously, he didn't have time to process it necessarily. But to me, I'm assuming that Loki is. It's not necessarily like, oh, he learned the same lessons as the original Loki much quicker. But I feel like those lessons are going to come easier to him now because
different, though.
Yeah, because he's seen the movie. It's not like he saw the movie automatically. He's caught up. He's still he is a variant. He's still
it's just
a different version.
It's a different Loki, right? Because like this Loki, days
open
before,
him up to those lessons. Like it's gonna open him up to learning the lessons he needs to learn to become a better version of himself.
Like this
but
Loki.
Also the way you said that Mobius just like systematically like broke him and like got him to open up like immediately.
Yes.
By like peeling away the layers
before,
of the
probably.
Even
he's been doing this for gazillions of years.
Yeah, millennia, we're assuming, right?
Yeah, at least.
But it seemed like Loki, like particularly like towards the end of the episode, like really was accepting some of that. He was like, I do these bad things because I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was
it's like something the weak do to project,
something to reflect
control
on himself and actually like start to force him to understand, like, why am I the way I am? Like, why? So
this was like a massive perspective shift for him. That doesn't mean like he's automatically back to normal, back to OG.
Right, because this is the Loki. Yeah, this is the Loki who just tried to conquer
Earth. An opening for development. It gives him an opening to be more than a snarky god of mischief.
And this Loki was like seriously saying that glorious purpose line days before. To humans, like when he shows up in at S.H.I.E.L.D. and steals the Tesseract. I'm pretty sure he says the line there, and he says it again in the first Avengers movie. But like then seeing that, Thanos has told him, you got to go take Earth and you get the Tesseract, and then seeing that guy who you just did this thing for kill you, and you're just like, yeah, what a bunch of BS that was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think I don't know if it's good Loki, so to speak, yet. I just think we're in like a malleable Loki zone right now.
Yeah. And man, when you consider like WandaVision and opening up the Nexus being the fact, what did Catherine Hahn's character call her?
The Nexus being,
no, but she said chaos magic.
Yeah,
chaos magic. So like we've been introduced to chaos magic. Right.
It's what the Darkhold does. It's like
and between that, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and now like we're dealing with like multiple timelines and Kang. Like I'm a little worried that there's going to be like so many different angles that we need to keep track of that it's going to get confusing. Like I said earlier, unless they simplify it somehow.
I think it's going to get simplified. I think it's going to get simplified by that. This is nonsense.
Condense everything
instead of looking at it as like
concept.
I have to control my knowledge of all these things, we're just going to have to be okay sort of wallowing around and playing in the sand of all the things they're giving us, and we'll pick up whatever toys we come across. I think that's a more useful way to look at it, because there's going to be so much to keep track of.
And us mere mortals don't all have Jenny brains to process with. So
I thought that scene was really amazing, though. Like, I keep coming back to this, but I thought that interrogation scene was like masterfully done.
It was pretty long too.
It was a lengthy
that was like
scene,
a 15-minute,
and it had
almost.
the flashback, the DB Cooper flashback, which we know. I'm so happy they did that. That was so cool.
Did anybody see our reaction? Notice that Jenny picked up that it was DB Cooper like the instant.
I mean, we knew it was DB Cooper in the trailers. I feel like.
Oh, we did.
Did you?
Yeah,
I didn't know that he was coming, but
right,
like
I
I
just
knew
feel
what that
stupid
was
now.
the minute she said Mr. Cooper, and it had any sort of like
that was in the trailer,
going
and you see him on the plane with the.
Do you feel like the fact that he like winked
at
he winked at the stewardess and was like, "I'll be seeing you again" or whatever? That was almost like, okay, we're gonna be coming back to this moment.
Maybe who
at
knows?
some point.
But he brought up a good point though.
If you
even though that
guys
was like
want
a joke.
like an entertaining way to spend like an hour or so, go down like a Wikipedia rabbit hole about DB Cooper. It's one of the most interesting crime stories.
I don't know. Maybe you
century.
can clear this up for me. I thought it sounded like an error to me, like in terms of timing. But Loki, like when he's describing the DB Cooper thing, he said, I lost a bet to Thor. I was young and I lost a bet to Thor." But then I was like, well, wait a minute.
Well, you weren't young. It was just the 1970s.
Yeah, wouldn't young Loki be like 1,000 years ago? Like, so that didn't make sense to me. Like, he wasn't young. He was like
but I think it implies though that at that point they sort of manipulated the timeline and were messing with Midgard, because that's why he was like, well, we did that, and why didn't the timekeepers?
Yeah, his whole thing was like, timekeepers.
He was like, why didn't they care about that?
He was pointing out their own inconsistencies.
I guess I forgot. Wait, so wait, they can. And Asgard, like in the bridge and all that, they can manipulate time. They can go.
I have no idea what the implication there was. That I feel, at least I thought that was
a little
something
messy.
Out of time.
I thought that was
Again,
like,
I kind of like don't want to overthink that. That feels like okay, maybe that was a little bit messy, but that feels like not the most significant detail here.
But the point that Loki raises about how the timekeepers are very inconsistent. I think that.
Yeah, no, exactly. He's calling out already. He's calling out the ideological.
He's like, why? Yeah, he's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So like Lavelle is pointing out something really important. He says, aren't Wanda's powers growing so that she doesn't just create illusions? She can rewrite the fabric of reality. And I thought that like the fact that she's a Nexus being, it's like, oh, is that going to imply that like literally almost anything that Wanda does can create an alternate timeline?
Well, she was reading that Darkhold at the end of the series.
She could hear her
little
kids.
cabin.
She could hear Wiccan and Speed through the universe.
And also the fact that Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, like we already know the title of it, that almost subtly implies that we know that this whole thing is going to go to shit at the end of this. Like that the TVA
Tobey Maguire
control and the timeline is going to turn into chaos.
So that Darkhold,
I think it's already in chaos.
Interactions with that book never end well. In Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it was part of the Ghost Rider storyline, and the thing that happened was that they were like using the Darkhold to harness quantum energy from another dimension, and they were succeeding, but it was creating all kinds of anomalies in this dimension. And the thing that was revealed was that if you steal energy, it actually kind of goes along with like the laws of thermodynamics, where there's a constant state of energy, the constant amount of energy. So if you change that, if you break the laws of thermodynamics and you steal energy from one dimension and bring it into this dimension, it risks all dimensions collapsing in on each other and like the end of every dimension.
And so hold on, did you know something else? Did you notice about it? Because in the TVA like animated video, it ends with Earth. Specifically Earth. And I thought that was interesting, considering that this thing is about the whole universe.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
It ended on specifically just the planet Earth, and I was like,
You know,
interesting point.
Why is
even
that?
in the MCU, we've already seen like Skrulls.
I can come up with an
Captain
explanation for that, though.
Marvel.
I feel like in the same way, going back to the Future again, because it's a great example. The way 1955 is described as like the red letter date in time, where like everything just kind of converges around it. You can already kind of like the Avengers and that planet Earth is like the converging point in the universe.
I think that the multiverse is already messing
space
up
and time are like converging on Earth in many ways.
I'm sort of
the Avengers.
I do think that
Infinity Stones. There's multiple Infinity Stones on Earth, like that kind of stuff.
I do think that Kang is involved still. I do think that he's involved still, but I think the more
Who's
plausible.
involved still?
I said I do think that Kang is involved still with like Ravenna Renslayer and all this stuff, but I think an even more plausible thing is that the timeline is already in chaos and the TVA is just lying about it. I think that has a potential.
So possible. There's such a lack of transparency in this organization that like it's completely possible that they're lying about
to keep everything in the MCU consistent, because there's so many instances where you could be like, well, why didn't the TVA show up here? Why didn't they show up here?
Well, and what's going to be really interesting from like a character point of view is if some of these characters who work for the TVA end up finding out that their own organization is lying to them, like Mobius, who's already a bit of a renegade, already kind of playing by his own rule book. If he finds out that the organization he serves and that the potentially even created him is, corrupt, what does that mean? What about B-15, who's like a true believer? She's clearly a zealot.
There must be other characters that we haven't met yet.
What existential crisis does she have if she finds out she's serving an evil god, basically?
Because the judge seemed like she was pretty like important and powerful, and B-15 is obviously like the militaristic like general, like she's in charge of like the muscle. And like Mobius is obviously, like as you pointed out, he's kind of like he's a renegade, but he's important in terms of like his job. But we can only assume that there must be other employees too. Like, is there a president of the TVA? Are there more powerful people that we haven't met yet?
I think the highest person
Mobius
in charge is Ravenna, because
Lavelle is also pointing out that there was like one Skrull in that scene in the trailer, I know, but that everybody else seems to be kind of human. Which is an interesting point, that the TVA seems to be like, maybe there's at least one Skrull around, but we didn't see a lot of like aliens or other species there. The timekeepers,
and you can get a Skrull. You can get a Skrull on Earth too.
You can, and I mean Skrulls are everywhere, and they're shapeshifters too, so they could look like anybody. So I do find that interesting, and I wonder if that's like oversight or if there is some.
I think
some darker story behind
the way that Mobius said to Renslayer that I'm always looking up to you, like the way he delivered that line, it made it seem like she was the most powerful one, or she's either a rising star or has been getting more and more power.
She's clearly very powerful.
Or she's I think the person of the highest.
She did say that line though, where she was like, "If anything goes wrong, like it's on you." So, but that's like implying like, oh, they could both get in trouble, so he has to take the blame. To me, that implies like there is somebody.
I think that just implies that she has power over him, because she was like, "You can't do this," and she's like, "If this messes up, I'm letting you do this, but I can, you're gonna get."
But clean up your own mess if you screw it up, basically.
Sure, yeah, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. In real time, I kind of read that as like we could both get in trouble if I let you do this, but I guess so.
But again, I feel like that's such a device out of like a procedural show. I can imagine like NCIS, like the Secretary of the Navy going to Agent Gibbs and being like, "Okay, do it your way, but like I don't want to hear about it. I don't want this coming back up the chain if it blows up in your face. Clean up your own mess."
I think by the end of the show, I think we're going to see this right here. You can't see my hand. This right here, the background of me in total chaos. I think we're going to see the TVA in shambles.
Another great visual reference, by the way, Fritz Lang, Metropolis. It's like one of the earliest films. It was made in the 1920s. It's a
great movie.
It's a great movie. It's like it's so important to every sci-fi movie that came after. But like, just look up images of that. It's very Art Deco, but like again, the city, the Metropolis.
Oh, it is so Metropolis. Yeah.
This sort of set design here. It's very Jetsons, but like I also see such a strong visual reference there. And there's like, just look up visual images, like Google image.
And Casey is so like the people behind the desks are so much like, the people just marching off to work. Like, I don't think these people, like that guy literally doesn't know what a fish is. He said he lived his life. I know it was a joke, but he said he lived his life behind a desk, like his entire life.
Like he's never left.
He's never left the TVA. Like there's something sinister about it.
So sinister. I don't know if either of you saw Umbrella Academy at all. It unfortunately just got canceled, which is too bad. It got canceled. It was a fun show, so it's not coming back for another season. Unfortunately, it was a fun show. I enjoyed it, but the second season was like the time travel season, and the character number 5 ended up basically doing what Loki's doing against his will. He ended up having to work for this time authority and time traveled into the 60s actually, and had to like jump to a bunch of different times in the 60s and clean things up. And in that show as well, it turned out that yes, they're powerful. Yes, they can control time travel, but this organization was super corrupt and super effed up. And the Umbrella Academy ended up basically having to go to war against this time authority because they were lacking transparency. They were corrupt. There was like a power struggle going on internally. So there's actually like a very similar, storyline there. I was disappointed to see that got canceled. I liked that show, but
I didn't know that. That sucks.
There's also something funny. A lot of people have commented on Eugene Cordero, who plays Casey, the desk jockey.
He's in Mandalorian.
Yes, he was in The Mandalorian. Fans of Eugene Cordero should also.
He was? Who was he in Mando?
He was in the first season. He was one of the farmers on Sorgan in the first.
Okay, episode. No, he was actually. Was he one of the two that went?
He's
to
one of the
get
two.
Mando?
Yeah, he is the most screen time in the.
He's a
episode.
funny guy. He's
I
an
actually
improv.
didn't like
He's
his
a
performance in that
UCB
scene.
improv comedian, but like, look at The Good Place. He appears in The Good Place as Jason Mendoza's like best friend from Florida, who's this like absolute wastrel. But there's also like a funny connection there in The Good Place. Maya Rudolph played this character who's like a comedy version of Ravenna Renslayer. She's a judge and she's extremely powerful, but like it's Maya Rudolph and she'd rather just like watch terrible TV all day or whatever. But that was a show that was like very funny and very lighthearted, but managed somehow to tackle a lot of these same existential questions about like life between dimensions and what power means in that situation.
Are you sure Umbrella Academy was canceled? I don't think it is.
It was just on a list of like shows that got canceled that I read. But either way, if it turns out that I'm wrong about that, I'll be pleased. It was on a list of like Netflix shows that got canceled.
There's people in the chat, and I looked it up. Apparently, they just revealed the titles of.
Maybe they've already shot another season, but have been canceled from future seasons. I was just reading a list of like what got canceled and what's been renewed on Netflix. But
this is from Deadline. So
okay,
I feel like
Deadline will know. What is Deadline saying?
It just says, sorry guys for the Umbrella Academy discussion, but it says Netflix unveils season 3 episode titles and release date.
So maybe they've already shot season 3 and they're just not getting another season after that. That would amount to the same thing.
Hey, right. So one thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that we're assuming Loki variant is actually taking those reset devices that they use to like eliminate the timeline or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're actually collecting those devices.
So that they can't reset the timeline. They're creating.
No, but also doesn't that also
everywhere.
potentially like create mass destruction on like every timeline or like
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
or to like shatter the main timeline entirely kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, I wonder. I'm not convinced that's a bad thing. I don't know. I don't think like shattering reality is a good thing, but I also don't think that one timeline should get to be supreme over all others. So I wonder what the upshot of that is. Like, is this character just because it's Loki, a version of Loki, god of mischief, trickster, doing bad stuff?
I think it's probably a Loki.
Like a higher
It's a Loki that the TVA probably tried to take out, and they survived, and now they're going against the TVA.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't kind of like when he shows up in the 1500s in that French church that there was like they're basically like investigating a time murder. Like somebody
exactly.
Like they know when somebody shows up out of time and like does something that isn't supposed to happen, and then they show up and it's like already happened and they've taken the reset device. So exactly. Like this Loki variant is one step ahead of them every time.
Teams,
but also I think he's actively taking them out. Like they,
Oh, that's right. They said this is like the 8th time this has happened.
I think it's
I think the 6th attack this week, and then when they were lured into the Wild West, into that Oklahoma scene by the shovel device. That was like a lure. It was like a trap to get them there.
Because it gave off the aura, the time aura.
Exactly. They put the thing with the weird anachronistic time signature there just to get the TVA there so that they could set the field on fire and murder them. So it seems like they're being like entrapped, like someone is actively killing off. This Loki variant apparently is actively killing off Minutemen, TVA agents, right?
Oh, so James Bayo, great comment there. He says the video in the queue said it's the main sacred timeline, but is it a timeline that gives someone specific power and the variant is trying to end that person's rise to power?
That's what the theory is about Kang, is that Kang is using the power of the TVA to prune, because it's not that free will doesn't exist, it's that the TVA is literally making all of those decisions that they don't, that someone at the top who doesn't like, irrelevant. Like the whole pruning thing. Like you see that there's a poster in the background with like, it looks like one of those little animated figures sitting on like a tree, but it's the timelines and they're snipping timelines. 100%.
And
it's like those other timelines still happen. It's just that these people are making them gone, and that's kind of messed up.
Yeah, and why do they get to have that much power over everybody else's eternity? So
and
but again, this is like, even if we think Kang is like bad or is chaotic or whatever, it's back to this thing that we were saying. Even Thanos has some good points. Like Thanos's methods, for sure, very, very questionable. You don't just like randomly kill half of existence. That's not the way we should get things done. but at the same time, he's basically like trying to solve climate change. You know, like he kind of has
The Mad
a
Titan.
good point underneath his madness and his
Oh god, imagine like a
questionable methods.
Thanos variant that they got to deal with.
Oh my
god, I didn't even want to go to bed. I mean, this is my thing about
gay
Kang.
Thanos.
Whichever side of the fight, whichever side of the fight Kang ends up being on, whether he ends up being an ally or an antagonist, I kind of can see why he would have a good point, because
that's the only difference. They're like, no,
I don't think like destroying reality is okay, but I don't think
too powerful.
Like the TVA is okay either. So it really makes me wonder sort of where Kang fits in.
I think we've been presented with very complicated questions, and I think we're going to get very simple answers.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Probably.
But like I was talking about how like they're gonna need to simplify, like that is almost like necessary.
They're gonna need to Ralph Boner us just to like tie up the timeline in a way
hopefully
that
not
can
like that
understand.
Though, because hopefully that's a scenario where they're like teasing that something specific is gonna happen and then they don't do it. Like that's
or like the power broker thing is another example of that. Like we went so deep and then it's like, is it just
that one was
Sharon?
all on us though?
I'm still not convinced.
I was sharing all the time.
That.
Mephisto, like, different story, and the Boner especially different story. But
yeah, the Boner thing they did to us. That was not us. But I mean,
in the context of this show, I think it's like there's so much potential in the writing capacity of this time travel, and you know, you have literally all of time to play with. There's no limits on what you can write. So I feel like we'll get a satisfying conclusion.
And regardless, it's going to be such a like audiovisual feast. We're going to see all these different time periods with like set design and costume design and stuff.
So Aurelio just put down like the whole entire scenario. A time bomb to shatter the sacred timeline, which will open it up so Loki variant L1130 survives this show. Wanda breaks it apart to get her kids, and Spider-Man fight the Sinister Six.
All possibilities. We have no idea what could happen here. There's so much that like we already know is coming, which throws spanners in the works. Like Levi was saying, we already know that 90% certain there are going to be multiple Spider-Men.
So do we know why Kang is supposed to be associated with Ant-Man 3 instead of this?
Because that also has to do with that movie is called Quantumanium, I believe. And that also has to do with
so that's quantum realm though. That's not. I know. Like I guess time doesn't exist.
Yeah, and that's already another realm and like thing, and so he would want to probably conquer that too. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Or like
interesting.
Because we see the TVA is literally like they have time bandit doors that they just activate. They'll like activate a portal and like walk into the 16th century like wherever they want to, whenever they want to. But maybe Kang doesn't do it that way. Maybe he time travels via the quantum realm or something like that because he has.
Either way, he would want to dominate the
fourth.
I think it's within his
millennium technology.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. used the quantum realm in this whole
Kang's
time travel scenario they had going on too.
According to some nonsense, James Bayo says.
According to
some nonsense. I think he's confirmed in the cast of Ant-Man.
So like, isn't that might be an answer for like we were saying, like where did that city in the TVA that Mobius shows him, and we're like, where does this exist if it's not like in a physical place? Like maybe they are in the quantum realm.
Yeah.
Maybe TVA is in the quantum realm. That's where they are right now. No.
Yeah,
nobody.
I don't
see
know.
that bubble world when Scott gets Janet. Yeah. Good point.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tiny city in the quantum realm when you go in.
Oh yeah, right back to Orion's belt, right? Like the.
Either way, it's a realm thing, and anytime you got a realm there, it's something Kang wants to either conquer. You know, like it's a different realm. That's his thing. He's like, give me the realms.
So if Kang, if we know that Kang is going to be appearing in Ant-Man 3. And that, like, at most...
we know that for a fact. That is something we know for a fact.
At most, he'll get teased, maybe introduced in a post-credit sequence or something in this.
I think so.
Then who do we think is technically going to be, like, the main bad guy of this? Is it going to be a Loki variant? Is it going to be Mobius? Is it going to be...
I think it's going to be a
TVA in general as an organization? Yeah.
I think it's going to be like a Winter Soldier Hydra reveal, where it's like...
Okay, yeah.
It's like, oh, the TVA is kind of bad. And, like, that's the twist.
Again, they're definitely bad. Like the direct parallels that are being drawn to like visually to 1984 to Nazi propaganda, like that's enough to make me think
it's no good.
They're bad. And not even to mention the bioethical questions that come up, but like they're definitely up to no good. I don't trust them.
So like the fact that the TVA like they do have like super advanced technology like that, like their incinerator weapons that they just like touch people and it like
pruning,
disappears, or like their time doors where they can just like walk. So they do have some like super advanced technology, obviously, but then also like the majority of it was like analog 1960s looking,
Well, not the
very
majority of it, just like
almost
some.
like obsolete looking technology, like you were
Because
saying,
look
Jenny.
look behind me. It's just the aesthetic. I think some of it
Yeah,
Yeah.
is like presenting that way because it has to blend all of the time, and
yeah, there's definitely the visual element of it all, and the fact that
it's
it has the visual appeal to it, but
it's
it's
been pointed out
also
that like Mobius is an obsession with like the '90s. Like he has like the Joss de Soda and stuff.
Yes,
oh,
Like he's
yes,
got
that's right.
I
like
saw
he's got
Yeah.
that.
like a '90s thing. So I feel like it's
We
just
pointed out, so we talked about this a bit in our reaction, but that it's this whole sort of like retro but advanced. It's this idea of like the way people in the past thought the future would look. Like when you look at OG Star Wars, you know, and
Ray
it's like
Jetson.
how somebody in the 70s thought that the distant future would look. And it looks really hackish to us now, but it's a nice little nod to the idea that like all times and no time and all the ideas that you might have about time
Yeah,
exist simultaneously and are also rendered meaningless in this
yeah.
So
place.
James Baio is saying he thinks that the big bad should be something close to Loki, and I think that's true for now. But I don't think Loki, once he interacts with another Loki, is gonna turn against that Loki. I think Loki will be able to convince Loki that their side is the right side.
Is the right side. That's the interesting thing, is like how does he, if he is developing into a character with more moral clarity, which we
yeah,
already in the space of one episode with him seeing this video of himself and then kind of breaking down at the end and being like, why I do bad things. Again, it was an amazing interrogation technique, but there was that thing where like Owen Wilson broke him down and was like, you've been put on this earth to hurt others, like you're no good, you're not a redeemable character, basically. And I was like, ouch, that's not true.
well,
And then he ran away and he ended up seeing
And doesn't
the
Renslayer
rest of
say
the
like this
video.
was never
But
even your story? Like you're just doesn't she say like this wasn't your story?
yeah, they're
Like,
knocking him down like you glorious purpose, whatever, but he has to find a way to
right.
achieve the same level of moral clarity that the Loki we know from the Avengers
Yeah.
achieved. And
Well,
like, does that mean he's gonna defeat a version of himself, or that he's gonna get them on side? Like, will there be multiple? Will like Lady Loki or whoever it might be come on side at the end because of our Loki's good influence? Like, all
well,
of these
their
things are
individual
possible, right?
motivations are so important too, because like Loki that we know, his motivation has always been to become a god king, right? He wants to
Yes,
be the king.
the King
And
of Space. Yeah,
that's all he has ever really wanted. But like as you pointed out in the reaction, like now that Loki's had this realization that like Infinity Stones are like freaking useless here, and like even his prized Tesseract is just like it's just a cube. It's
a
just
rock.
pointless.
Yeah. It's a
That like
paperweight.
now what to
paperweight.
his motivations, like you're saying, oh, this is the new greatest power in the universe to Loki.
Right.
Being king is like pointless now. Like now he can actually like own time if he wants to.
I said this in the reaction. The
So-
minute his eyes sort of teared up and he said, "Is this the greatest power in the universe?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, now he
wants
doesn't."
this.
Is he
was
having
so
power
focused-
lust for that
He
now?
was so focused for the first part of the episode. I'm like, I need to go home. I want to go back. And now
Yeah.
he doesn't want to go back because he knows that ends in his death. He doesn't want to go back just to die.
Yeah.
Now he has like he is still Loki. He is still the god of mischief. Now I'm sure that like there's this underlying motivation of I want to be in charge of all of this. But it'd get boring really fast if he didn't develop at all as a character.
But that's why it's like,
So
if
there has
Lady
to be a
Loki comes
balance
in
there.
and like at first they're kind of like, yeah, let's work together. Maybe they share the same motivation at first, but then like that they'll be at odds at some point eventually because you can't have multiple Lokis ruling the universe at the same time. They would eventually become enemies of each other.
Different
even if they did.
universes, perhaps.
Right.
Or yeah.
Like
yeah.
I
I don't
think
know.
for now, I think
This is
at
where it gets
this moment,
confusing.
like at this moment in time, I think his internal motivation is probably still I want to be the god of time instead of just being the god of Asgard or the god of Midgard or the god of space, whatever little thing. Owen Wilson was like, that's cute. You want to be the god of space? Cute. But like now he's like, I want to be the god of time. But I think he's going to have to move past that sort of mercenary agenda, especially if they're continuing this into season 2 and perhaps future seasons after that, that he's going to have to develop beyond just like conspiracy to become king. He's going to have to learn to do good.
Yeah.
As he did. That's one of the reasons we like this character. Why Tom Hiddleston is so great in the part is because we've always liked that character. He's so much fun. He's like teaming up with others out of convenience, and then he always has a little trick at the end, but he's never been all bad. You know, there has always been something good in him, just tempered with mischief. Yeah,
all right.
maybe, but like, you know, that character did come such a long way, but he also still remained God of Mischief right to the end. You know, there is that duality in that character.
All right, guys. So listen, it's almost 8. Levi, you
I do have to go.
All right, so let's start to wrap it up. Is there anything else burning about this episode that we missed or that we want to talk about?
I don't think so.
It was good.
Yeah, I think we really covered most of it.
We covered a lot of ground.
And this is really just the first episode. Like,
go read Slaughterhouse 5.
Yeah, read Slaughterhouse 5. Read however they're translating Les Jeux Sont Faits into English. It's a really wacky. It's a screenplay, but you could watch the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So, hey, Jenny is back. It's a reason to rejoice. We, although Jenny isn't watching The Bad Batch, we'll probably still try to get you to come on and maybe talk a little bit.
Yeah, come on.
We'll probably do a little bit of Loki talking on Saturday.
And there's some other stuff. There was some good Black Panther news, some castings
Namor.
And news. Namor. There was some great news in that world this week. So we got a first look at Jensen Ackles as Soldier Boy in The Boys. He has a full-on beard.
Mandalorian confusion.
Yeah, there's some other stuff going on this week that we can all chat about.
Oh yeah, Mandalorian. Yeah.
A lot of confusion around that.
So yeah, we can. I think this episode of The Bad Batch, I'm predicting it's going to be like a particularly awesome one because we've had kind of like a lull a little bit.
I think it's going to be good. I think the next week's going to be the really knock out of the park one.
You mean.
But
like the actual like mid-season.
But I could be wrong, and I feel like the Lucasfilm people are hashtag good soldiers follow orders today. So I feel like I'm going to be wrong. So I feel like it's going to be real tough tonight. But
well, good luck with that.
Yeah. that's literally what they're like. They're like, yeah, this episode's really intense, guys. I'm like, my prediction was wrong.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for being here, Levi. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Jenny, thank you for being here too. I'm glad you can fulfill everyone's desires.
I missed all of you. I'm so happy to be back in this Zoom room with everyone. I missed everybody.
Awesome, dude. Yes, and thanks to everybody in the chat. Lavelle, Mandy, you guys. Like, I know Mandy in particular, it's late for you.
It's late.
You're across the pond. Thank you for staying up and listening to us and getting a lecture from Jenny is always an educational experience. So we're looking forward to it. I guess we're going to be doing Loki every Wednesday now and Bad Batch every Friday. So we got a couple things every week now. So it looks like
for the
at
next
least for the next 6 weeks we're going to have some good activity and lots to talk about and looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking to everybody. It's been fun. All right. Jenny, Levi, peace. Everybody in the chat.
Bye everybody.
Keep it real, guys. So long.